a lot of people don't take the time to process and think about what their core values are, and therefore what is the culture they're trying to build.
Hi, welcome to the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel. I'm your host, Tarun Stevenson, and we are all about helping you lead, communicate, and grow to your full potential. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite podcasting app, don't forget to subscribe and follow so that you can stay up to date with all our latest episodes. All right, here's the latest episode. Let's get into it. Well, hey everybody, I am here with somebody I've been wanting to interview for a very long time, and that's my younger brother, Sunjay Stevenson. He is an incredible leader. He has actually been a role model for me in my leadership development. He has been in church leadership for almost 20 years. He currently serves with the team at IC Church. They're a multi-site church in Australia, 6 campuses in Australia and 2 overseas. He has established their campus in Mumbai, India, and he's now just on his way to go and look after the campus in Hong Kong, Sky City Church. Welcome, Sunjay.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be with you.
It is. It's always good to catch up. I find that we probably catch up more by Zoom than we do in person nowadays.
That's true. Such is the times we live in.
It is, isn't it? It is.
Yeah.
So why don't we, for anybody that's never met you, why don't you tell us a little bit of your journey? Your journey, really, you started in church leadership very young, and that's really been your lane, and you've stayed in that lane consistently right throughout your career. And so tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to be where you are, and maybe some interesting things about you that they might not know.
Yeah, so as you say, I did start out in church leadership very, very young. I went straight from high school, straight to Bible college or seminary. And so I was 18, not 19 at college, and finished around about when I was 20 years old. So by the time I was 21, I became a pastor, or a youth pastor in a church here in Brisbane. And so probably that is a lot younger than some people might start in ministry, but that was my experience. And I've done a little bit of everything in church world: youth pastoring and, following up new people, training people, leadership development, Bible college, church planting, and so on and so forth. So I've done a lot of things over, the last 20 something years. And, really the way I got into it, I feel like this is a calling. This is not a career choice. When I was 18 and wrestling with my identity and who I was as a person, I really felt the prompting of God to go into this sort of, into church leadership. And it became a passion in my life. It's still a passion in my life. And I love doing what I'm doing.
It's awesome. It's awesome. And one of the things I love about you is you have a really strong conviction about what you do. And I think that has really carried you through many of your ups and downs through your leadership. It hasn't always been smooth sailing, but you've just had this rock solid conviction that this is what you're meant to be doing. Talk to me about how you came to be like that, because you and I, when we were younger, we were in bands. We probably didn't have aspirations to go into church leadership, but yet that's where we've both ended up. And there was a bit of a transition for you in your early days when you had to wrestle with the idea of doing something that you hadn't contemplated. What was that like for you?
Yeah, that was a very interesting experience. That you're probably talking about when I was about 19 years old. I was at Bible college, but hadn't really thought that I was there just to do ministry. I probably thought I was there to learn a little bit about the Bible, a little bit about God, but I definitely still had aspirations to be a musician, a drummer. And if you asked me back then what my goal in life was, it was to be a rock star, a Christian rock star that traveled the world. And so that was my thing. Probably in my second year of college, I started having a real gnawing feeling on the inside about becoming a preacher, which was a completely foreign thought to me in terms of what I thought I wanted to do in life. But it was just a thought that didn't go away. It was like this thing that kept saying, you're meant to be a preacher. And it bothered me because I thought I was pretty clear I wanted to be a drummer. And I had a very profound spiritual experience during that time, where I felt God really speak to me and revealed to me some things about my childhood. When I was 8 years old, I used to actually dream about speaking in front of people and helping people. And it was like I had a flashback of that moment and realized, even though I thought I was, pursuing a dream to play the drums, it was actually probably a deeper dream of mine since I was much younger, to speak, to help people through my speaking, or particularly preaching in the church context. And so I accepted that when I was 19 years old. I was wrestling it, then I accepted it. I thought, this is what I'm meant to do. And through a series of experiences, it just confirmed to me, the more I went down this path, the more I realized this is exactly what I want to do. This is what I'm called to do. This was what I was wired to do. And I guess that's why it became a conviction. To me, I think there's a difference between preferences and convictions.
Yeah.
When you're young, you usually don't know the difference between your preferences and convictions, and so we go on a lot about what we want. But after you live a little bit, go through a few life experiences, you start to realize there's some things that are preferences. I would like them, but when I'm put under, maybe if I'm really pushed, I could give it up.
Right.
Whereas your convictions are those things that when you're pushed, when you're challenged, they're the things you can't give up. You would fight for those things. And I think you only really discover those things once you've lived a little bit, walked a little bit through the journey of life, and you start to discover, I feel a conviction about what I'm doing in life, what I'm meant to be doing, and who I am as a person. So, yeah.
So what about for somebody who's perhaps listening and the whole faith experience is not necessarily what their experience is, and they're trying to decipher what you're explaining here, their preferences versus their convictions. Is there a thought process that you go through? I know that your faith is very a strong component of you coming to those decisions, but what about your mental process of just trying to decipher the difference between a conviction and say a preference? Because I remember when, we were musicians as young, and we had dreams of being rock stars, as you say, and they were some pretty strong dreams. They were big dreams that you and I had. Maybe I was probably slightly more passionate about it, but we both felt very strongly about it. And you described that whole thing of, if somebody said you had to give it up, you'd have trouble giving it up. I think in the early days, we probably felt a bit like that about music. What was the process where you came to where you realized that actually maybe I could give music up and I'd still be satisfied? Because I went through a similar process much later, but what was your experience when you went through that thought process?
I think for me, it's all about identity, who you feel you are as a person. And one of the things that I went through in that journey is I started to realize the reasons behind my desire. A lot of the time, we don't really realize what motivates us behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And we go through these experiences in life. We meet people, we are affected by things, and we are shaped by all these experiences in life. But often we don't consciously recognize maybe what's motivating certain desires. And what I came to realize was a lot of my desire to be a rock star, a lot of my desire to play the drums, it came from a couple of places. And one of the places it came from is I wanted to do something significant that actually impacted a lot of people. Yeah. So superficially, as a teenager, I'm thinking of crowds, being on a stage, influencing people through music. I liked music. So that was some of the thought patterns that I had, but it came from a deep desire internally. I want to help a lot of people. I want to influence a lot of people. So that part. Then there was a second part, and that was I realized how deeply insecure I was as a person. I struggled to be confident. So here's the problem, right? I had this desire to do something great with my life and help a lot of people, but I actually struggled to believe in myself. And so for me, my greatest influence when I was younger was you, my older brother. So a lot of younger siblings, they look up to their older siblings. And so it was all this is subconscious stuff going on behind the scenes that I didn't realize. So for me, it's like the three big realizations were this. I wanted to do something great with my life. I didn't believe in myself, but I did believe in my older brother.
Right.
And my older brother was a musician. So I'm thinking, if I want to do something great with my life, I have to do it with my older brother.
Right.
And so I just kind of latched onto this notion of being a musician. So when I realized those three things, I realized, well, I do want to do something great with my life. And I start growing in a bit of confidence. And I realize, well, I've got to find out who I am. What are my passions? What are the things that I'm wired to do? And that kind of, so identity really is wrestling with who you are, wrestling with why you think the things you do, why you pursue the things you do. And if you're really honest with yourself, you can start to uncover, the things you're wired to do, the internal things that make you get covered up by all this other mess and junk and things you think about or don't think about. And so, and obviously I have a relationship with God. So God plays a big factor in, I believe he helps me discover who I am as a person.
Great.
So, that's a big part of that process for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, the amusing thing I find about that whole story is I went through almost an identical experience in reverse about 10 years later. You know, I'm in my late 20s. My music career is not going where I thought it would be going. I'm wanting to make a difference. I'm feeling insecure, and I'm looking at my younger brother who's found himself and is doing what he loves. And I'm thinking, I want to do what he's doing. And so it was almost like in a reverse process of what you went through in your teenage years. That's the sort of thing. And one of the things that I realized was, you talk about wiring, is I realized that with the motivations that were behind the music is I wanted to help people, and I love telling stories. I'm a songwriter. So I asked myself, what do I love about songwriting? And the thing I loved about songwriting is telling stories and helping people. And it suddenly dawned on me, well, I can tell stories and help people in a whole bunch of ways. It doesn't have to be music. What was the light bulb moment for you when you started to recognize the wiring, as you describe it, that made you inclined to become a preacher and not a drummer?
Yeah, it was I guess I really felt an inner prompting about, like I talked to you before about this gnawing thing inside of me that kept coming back to this idea of being a speaker, a preacher, that helped people. So that for me comes from my relationship with God. So that's the trigger point. That's the big part. But since then, I've gone through several experiences that I guess I accepted that path. But even as you start walking a path, you can still feel a lot of, self-doubts and identity stuff. And I think the longer I walked down that path, the more I discovered this is me. Sometimes you walk down a path and it's like the longer you walk down it, the further away you feel like you're from what you're made to do. Well, that I didn't have that experience with accepting the call to being in ministry, to being a preacher. The more I walked down that, the more I felt almost like a deep satisfaction in life, which is different from superficial happiness. And little things, like when I was in school, I struggled with exams, right? And so this is part of one of the experiences I went through. I struggled with exams. I felt like I was dumb because of that. One of the things of exams is you have to sit still and you can't talk. So as soon as I sit still and can't talk, I can't think clearly. And so I didn't do well in exams. It was later on in life when I'm in the middle of speaking and preaching on a stage and I'm moving and I'm talking and I'm thinking clearly. It's like these realizations come to me, like I wasn't made to do exams. I'm at my optimum best when I'm doing this. So when you have experiences like that, you can only become more confident in who you are and what you've accepted and the path. So it's like you're walking down the path, but it just keeps getting stronger. Like this is right. This is what I'm meant to do. And so there's lots of little experiences like that for me.
I love that story and I actually tell that story to teachers when I'm doing workshops on boys and how to work with boys that find it difficult to concentrate. I talk to them about your experience where you found your real path when you were able to move. You found that your brain worked better when you were moving. And so often we misidentify people, and maybe we misidentify ourselves and think that we are incapable of certain things. when it's really just the environment we're in rather than our capability.
Yeah.
So when you went down this path, I mean, obviously you started down a path, and you can feel like you're in the right place, but at the same time, there's this tension between who you want to become and where your skill set is now. You know, you maybe you're a preacher, this feels like it's right. Maybe the type of preacher you want to become, but you look at yourself and you say, I'm not there yet. And you've got to wrestle with the development process of continuing to walk a path where you feel slightly incompetent, maybe slightly inferior to other people that you compare yourself to. Tell us about some of that early experience when you were just becoming a preacher and a leader, some of the wrestles that you had with your intentional self and your reality.
Yeah, well, part of it is, you mentioned it, is that trap of comparison. We subconsciously or consciously constantly try and gauge where we are at in life by looking at someone else. Social media has exacerbated this, but it certainly happened before social media, where you try and get a feel for whether you're successful by looking at another person who you think is similar to you. For me, looking at another preacher, what are their levels of influence? What sort of crowds do they speak in front of? How successful are they at leading? What are their churches like? The problem with comparison, and I did that so much when I was younger, the problem with comparison, everyone has a different path to walk. Everyone has a different journey. Everyone is wired differently. It doesn't matter how similar you look to someone else. You are different from that other person. What you've got to do is you've got to get comfortable with your journey. And that's the second part, right? So the first part, my big problem was comparison. The second part is I had a lot of impatience. And we live in a generation where everything is now. And I guess over the years, I had to become okay with being on a journey that is going to take time. And it's my journey. It's not a race against anyone else. And I got to develop according to, my timeline. And that's hard. But if you stop comparing yourself, you can start to be a little bit more okay with your journey, your personal journey. Impatience. Like, I think it devastated me when I was younger. I was constantly trying to get more successful quicker. And first of all, what is success, right? I mean, you make up your own version of success, and then you put pressure on yourself when you haven't got it. I think one of the things that really helped me with that is I heard a couple of people speak about this whole notion of, the first 20 years of your life, you're learning. The first 20 years you're forming, or something like that. The second 20 years you're learning. Then after that you're performing. I can't remember the details, but basically I had this realization earlier in my life, in my ministry, that I was actually learning. So you think when you finish uni or you finish college that you've finished learning. The truth is you're probably perfecting something until, if you're working in a career, if you're working in a particular field, you're probably going to be perfecting a particular skill set at least until you're 40, like at least for 20 years. Most of us, the notion of practicing and getting better for 20 years is ridiculous. We're like 3 or 4 years at uni is way too long. But the truth is, experts are not experts when they're young kids. That's just the reality. And when you see people that are so-called experts and they're really young, sometimes it just looks like that, and then they fizzle out and you don't hear from them again. The truth is, expertise happens over a long period of time. If you're willing to just go through a process of the potentially mundane, honing your craft for a long period of time, you will find that you get to a place one day where I've become an expert. And here's one of the problems with this generation. We chop and change our careers constantly. Looking for happiness. At the end of the day, we're looking for happiness. Now, I do see the benefit in positive change. The truth is, sometimes we change so much, we never get good at anything. So for me, I had to get okay with this whole notion that I'm becoming better, and it's okay that some of my successes that I hope for are not happening yet.
Yeah.
stay focused, keep moving in the same direction, get good at something, and you
Yeah.
start seeing fruits of your labor down the track.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was the type of question you were asking. At least that's what came
No,
to
no,
my mind.
I think you're hitting it there. I think it's Jack Ma that says, the founder of Alibaba. He talks about, in your 20s, just work in an organization and learn everything you can. In your 30s, hone in and focus on a passion. But it's not until your 40s that you can actually start something that you can lead, because you don't know enough before you're 40. And so I think you're hitting it right on the head. You've got to spend time learning before you can actually lead something significant. What about those situations where, you talked about comparison and how it can be so damaging, because you compare yourself to people who are maybe doing what you want to be doing. And you talked about how you've got to be patient and develop. But what about those anomalies, those outliers who seem to be hitting it when they're 20? Your Steve Jobs, your Bill Gates, and in church world, there's these young preachers that seem to just become overnight sensations in their 20s, and they're international, and you see those guys come through your world, and you're still slogging away 15 years later saying, when's my turn? How do you keep those two things in balance? Because obviously there's always those freaks that are able to just be good at what they do at a very early age, but for most of us, we have to take time to develop it.
Yeah. Well, some of that is true. Like, there are some unique individuals that seem to just stand out very quickly and just have an enormous amount of success.
Mm.
But the longer I live, the longer I've been around, the more I realize it's not as common as we think. We
Right.
see a lot of overnight sensations, but we
Mm.
also see a lot of people fizzle out really quickly.
Yeah, right.
Uh, there was a guy I used to look up to a lot when I was in my early 20s. I just thought, man, this is the guy I want to be like. His speaking style, his communication style. And what I did was I would look at his journey and go, oh, at this age, he was doing this. And at this age, he was doing that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that. And the reality is, he did have a lot of success early on. Now he's not even in ministry. You can't see him anywhere. He's fizzled out. I don't know what even has happened to him. And so the truth is, a lot of people just burn really bright and real quickly and then fizzle out.
Mm.
It's very rare that someone becomes super successful, super young, and stays like that for a long period of time.
Yeah.
What I would prefer is be more patient in my development, so my success in later life would be more sustained and less superficial. That's probably a thought that comes to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So, you have become, I guess, known for your ability to transition cultures and build teams. One of the things that I see has, I guess, had the opportunity to do is they've merged with a number of congregations over the years where you've had to transition existing cultures into the culture of IC, and you and your wife Robin have really been instrumental in that process. When did you recognize that building culture and teams was something that was a bit of a passion for you or a gift for you?
Yeah, probably to some degree it happened by accident. But culture to me has become so significant. In fact, even more important than vision. I think lots of people talk about the importance of vision. I do believe in vision, and I want to be a visionary leader. But the truth is, leadership is about influencing people. And if people experience culture before they buy into vision, or they buy into culture because culture is something they feel and experience, before they actually get on board with a particular goal or a particular mission in mind or vision. And that's something I've come to realize. But the truth is, culture comes from core values. And if you don't know what your core values are, you're probably going to find it hard to develop the culture you want. Sometimes we can see organizations go, oh, I like that. Or I like this. I like the way they do this. And we have this patchwork quilt of things that we're trying to implement our thing to be like, oh, I want my organization to have a bit of this, bit of that. Sometimes we've got to take a step back and say, what are my core values? What are my passion? One of my friends said something that really helped me. He said, one of the ways you discover your core values is you look at A, what excites you, and B, what annoys you. If you recognize what it really bothers you about the world, about stuff, about your career, about, or let's say the organizations you're a part of, you'll probably, and it's consistent, you'll probably go, well, the opposite of that thing that annoys you is probably one of your core values. We all kind of can dismiss things that are frustrating, but some things, no, that really gets me. Like, it's more than just a frustration. Maybe that is highlighting to you one of your core values. And then the equally is the passions, things that just get you excited. When you see something, it's not just, oh, I like it, but something on the inside just like explodes. It's an internal passion. Those two things usually start to highlight your convictions and your values, your internal value system. Now, take those values and say, this is what I want to help shape the organization that I'm leading with those values, the 3 values or the 4 values. In our church, we have 8 articulated cultures. But the truth is, a lot of people don't take the time to process and think about what their core values are, and therefore what is the culture they're trying to build. I love the 8 core the 8 cultures of our church. They are things that I believe in, they're convictions. And so when my wife and I say take on a church or start a new church, one of the first things we're doing is trying to establish those cultures within the organization, so people feel and experience culture before they go, oh, I believe in what you're aiming for, the vision.
Okay, so unpack that a little bit more in the sense of, okay, your culture is driven by your values, but obviously when people are walking through the door, they're not reading a list of your values, they're feeling, you use the word, they feel culture. How do you translate written values or articulated values into an experience where people feel your culture? Because there's a, go on.
No, the first thing, and it goes back to what I was just been saying, if a leader thinks they're developing culture, but those cultural statements, the things they've written down, are not their core values, just like things they like, then they're not going to develop the culture. If you don't have an internal conviction about those cultures. So if someone's running a business and thinks, I would like to have a culture of good customer service, but if that is not one of their absolute core convictions, like it super bothers them when it's not there, and when they see it, it just like sets something alight in them. If it's not one of their core, it doesn't matter how hard they try to implement that, it probably will not become a culture that people are experiencing. So first of all, it's got to be internal. The second thing is you've got to model it. So if you've got to live it, don't just talk. A lot of leaders say, I want you to do this. People do what you do. People buy into you, the person, before they buy into other things, because leadership is about influence to me, right? So if you're not living a culture, so I got to feel it, I got to internalize it, then I got to live it. People have got to see me like that. So for example, I'm very passionate. Well, one of my core values is passion, express passion. Don't bottle things up. If you're passionate about something, express it, say it, sing it, shout it, whatever, be excited, express passion. So that's one of my cultural values. If I don't behave as a passionate person, then it doesn't matter how much I tell people you should get excited about what you do. You should be passionate. I have to model it. So it starts internally, then I have to model it. The other factor is teaching. You can never underestimate the power of effective communication in shifting mindsets. To be able to explain a principle and make it come alive to someone, that's good teaching. A lot of people think teaching is operational stuff. That's not true at all. A skillful teacher can take a principle and make it just a light bulb come on in people. So you've got to figure out how to communicate and teach values or teach culture, because mindset shifts or thinking patterns are the biggest barrier to cultural change, and mindset shifts are the biggest promoter of cultural change if they're shifting in the right direction. And teaching good effective teaching to me is one of the things that probably is the most effective. And then the final thing is, as a leader, you got to actually hold people accountable. So if you got this inner passion, you're modeling it, you've also taught the value, then you got to actually reward people for living that, and you got to confront people who are not living that value.
Right.
You've got to be willing to actually get into people's face and have conversations about this. In other words, you've got to fight for culture. A lot of people, they say they want it, but then when it doesn't happen, they're just like, oh man, it's too hard to lead these people. No, you've got to fight for it. You've got to talk things through with people. You've got to confront people when they're not modeling the sort of culture in your organization you want, or you've got to celebrate the people, get excited about people who are living the sort of cultural values you actually value. So they're probably just the 4 things that probably come to mind when I think about developing or unpacking culture in a organization, business, church, whatever.
Great. So it's got to be internal. You've got to model it. You've got to live it. You've got to teach it well to shift hearts and minds, and then you've got to keep people accountable, or you've got to follow through with it. Let's go unpack a little bit about teaching to shift hearts and minds. How do you shift a heart or a mind? Because you're teaching from an internal passion that perhaps somebody doesn't share. How do you move people towards sharing your passion when they don't necessarily start there?
Yeah, well, the thing is, for me, I have a particular bent. My bent is teaching and preaching. I'm a communicator. So the way I move people is through my communication.
Sure.
Effective communication can change people's mindsets. If their mindsets change, their hearts are changing. Therefore, it's happening on the inside of them. That's why teaching me or communicating is so important. The truth, however, is not everyone is a really gifted speaker. So when I say teach, I don't necessarily mean you have to do all the teaching. You've got to find a way to expose the people you want to influence to principles, and it might be not through your teaching. It could be through a book. So we're going to read a book together, and that really encapsulates what I feel about this particular principle or culture. Or we're going to go to a seminar or a conference together where there are very gifted people who are communicating values that I want in. So basically, I want to provide resources to the people I'm influencing that are going to help me shift their internal disposition towards something. I'm not sure if that was what you were asking, but to me, it all comes down to that internal change and teaching and light bulb moments. I call them revelations, right? Revelation moments have to take place in the individual.
Yeah, good. So, okay, so I guess that sort of leads me to the part about keeping people accountable. What happens when you encounter people who are just they don't necessarily share, or they haven't had the light bulb moment, and you do have to confront them? Because I work with a lot of leaders that don't like confrontational conversations, and they're necessary. So how do you have those conversations in a way that keeps people on side, is able to help shift their mindset, but is still, I think the words you used is you've got to get in people's face a little bit. But you're not trying to be a bully. You're not trying to, be overbearing. You're just trying to shift the way that they view the situation. How do you have those kinds of conversations?
Well, first of all, that was one of the hardest things I ever learned to do as a leader. Found it very hard to confront people, challenge people, or correct people, because I wanted everyone to like me. So first of all, I have to deal with my own insecurities. Okay. If you're insecure, you're going to find it very hard to actually correct people or challenge people. Yeah. That's the first. Something's got to happen in you first. The second thing for me is you got to know the different levels of people in your organization. What I mean by that is this: there are different commitment levels. Right. So for me, in my world, that's a church. There are some people that might be on a staffing level. There are some people that might be at a volunteer level, but they're very active. Or there's some people that are a volunteer level, but they're not so active. And then there are people that are just attenders. They're just there. First of all, I've got to know the different levels of commitment. Yeah. The different levels of commitment will warrant a different type of challenge from me. Great. The more committed they are, the more open and honest I can be with them. Yeah. The less committed they are, the more gentle I have to be with my challenges. Or you could say, I'm encouraging you in a certain direction, as opposed to, hey, this is not the way we do things. We're going to have a conversation about the way we've been doing this right now, because this, that's the way we do it. So the higher level, the commitment. And so when people just talk about the skill of hard conversations, they fail sometimes to acknowledge that different people will respond differently to that challenge depending on where they are in their commitment level. So that's that part. Then the final part is there is a skill. There is you have to practice having open and honest communication with people. One of the things that I have in the past been bad at and am improved greatly is, because I'm a passionate person, I sometimes let myself be too emotional if I'm confronting people. You don't want to be angry when you confront people or challenge them. What you want to do is just talk honestly. Be willing to say, this is what you did do. I don't want you to do that. But at the same time, this is the famous sandwich technique, right? Willing to acknowledge the value of someone, be truthful about what you don't like about what they're doing, but still finish with the positive. So it's like the positive, the challenge or work area, and then the positive. I think the sandwich technique works very well for people who maybe are not at a very high commitment level, maybe a medium commitment level. So they still feel that you like them and appreciate them, but you're still open enough to say you did this and it wasn't good. But you still reaffirm that I still like you and you're still a valuable part of my team. So there's the positive and the work areas. So that's the skill of having that conversation, and different people, the conversation will be slightly different. So for me, it's like, deal with your insecurities, recognize who you're challenging and who you're correcting, make sure you do it the right way, and then practice the skill of having the hard conversations. I heard one speaker say, running churches are basically one awkward conversation followed by the next. And I tell you, that sounds really true when you've done a little bit of church leadership.
Yeah, and I think that'd probably be true in most leadership settings, whether it's a business or a corporation. Awkward conversations are par for the course, and you've got to get used to them for sure. So you've become very practiced in shifting culture. What are some of the, let's just take, for example, when I see mergers with another congregation and it's your job to come into another congregation and help to shift that culture, you've got the added barrier of they don't know who you are. Sometimes they feel like it's a takeover and they're resistant to you even being there. What's the process that you go through to win the confidence or win the affection of the people that you have to start bringing on board on that journey?
Yeah, that's brilliant. And here's where a lot of guys do go wrong. They focus on the skill of leading people, like in culture, teaching, all that sort of stuff, and they forget the very foundational thing of leadership, and that is influence. There are some people you're trying to lead and they're not looking to be led by you.
Yeah.
So the first thing is relationship or trustworthiness. I think the most perfect quote that summarizes how I feel about this comes from John Maxwell. He says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, exactly.
So when my wife and I are walking into a church setting or organization setting where we feel like we have to start leading a group of people that don't know us, the very first thing they've got to feel is our love and care, that we actually do care for them. That's where being a people person, you have to be a people person. You can't just be the grumpy old guy that has vision driving people towards a goal. You've got to actually genuinely care about people, like care about the fact that change is stressing some people out, even though you want the change. You're the person that's put them to drive the change. At least acknowledge that I want the change. I want to get you to change, but I also know that this is going to really stress you out because some people don't like change. And if they feel your care and sympathy, to stop every now and again and just say, how are you going? How are you feeling about things? Or just being friendly, just being a nice person. It's so easy to be a nice person. And sometimes people are so caught up in themselves that they forget about other people. Don't be a self-centered, arrogant leader that doesn't care about people. If you care about people, if you're a nice person and people feel that care, then you can start talking about shifting things and changing things. While you're shifting and changing things, if you start sensing something, oh, gee, they're getting a bit resistant, then go back to the thing. Okay, do they understand why we want to change, how it's going to be good for them? Are they feeling okay? Have they had a chance to talk through their feelings?
Yeah.
Sometimes people just talk about their feelings. So ask them, how are you feeling about all this?
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. So I guess that the people side of things, it's not
Yeah.
about the goal, it's about the people. We
Yeah.
only want to change culture because we want to help people, right? So if
Yeah.
you're not
Of
helping
course.
people while you're changing the culture, then you're
Yeah.
missing the point of changing culture.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
So is there a place in that regard to pacing yourself with change? So, you know, as leaders, you want to get the job done really quickly. Sometimes you recognize that your people are not there, they're not ready for it, and they're going to take a little bit more time. Is there a place where you slow down yourself for the sake of people rather than just bulldozing through? And what does that look like? How do you keep the tension between not being slack or letting culture slip, but at the same time being understanding that some people are going to take a little bit more time?
Yeah, no, patient. You said the right word, patience, and I think that's hard for a leader who's very
Mm.
driven and excited. And but that's definitely, like my wife and I are experiencing something like that at the moment, where we're helping transition a church, but because of
Mm.
COVID, we
Mm.
can't travel, we can't be somewhere, so
Yeah.
we're doing a lot of things online. And we determined in our heart, between now and the end of the year, a lot of the things we're doing online are not the teaching side of things or changing, um, but rather getting to know people. So we're having
Yeah.
a lot of meetings with different staff members and different leaders
Mm.
just to get to know them.
Yeah.
And that's the patience part, and
Mm.
recognizing that that is a legitimate part of the process. This is
Yeah.
not wasting time.
No.
You're going to waste time if you jump this process.
Mm.
And so yeah, but that comes down to, see, you're going to be okay with that if you care about people.
Yeah.
If you don't care about people and are trying to fake that, people know,
Mm.
man. Like,
Yeah.
people are not dummies. They know if you're just pretending to smile at them.
Mm.
So you gotta think through that part, and it helps you be patient. Yeah.
Yeah. So this new church that you're transitioning, that must be really complicated because you've never met them in person. I mean, I think you visited them once a number of
Yeah.
years ago, but
Yeah.
you've basically taken on the leadership position remotely. You're in Brisbane, Australia, they're in Hong Kong, and you're essentially leading this team in another country without any personal contact. What are some of the challenges that you're finding? Because I know that there are business owners and there are church leaders who are now having to lead via Zoom because they can't have personal contact with their teams or have diminished contact with their teams. What are some of the challenges you're finding, and how are you overcoming those challenges?
Well, typically stuff online, though it can be personal, tends to, like, if someone's in the same city with me, the natural thing that I want to do is, hey, let's go sit down in a cafe and talk over a cup of coffee. Well,
Mm.
I can't talk over a cup of coffee, but so what I've got to do is I've got to work very hard to make the Zoom meeting feel as personal as possible.
Okay.
So when we start that time, they've
Mm.
got to know from the very minute you start that this is not a formal official meeting where they're just going to, like, be grilling me, like interviewing me.
Mm.
They're you got to make people feel relaxed. It might come with small talk, talking about this, that, the other,
Mm.
asking them questions, getting them to feel like they're an expert. Tell me what
Yep.
what you think about this idea. And I think it's probably harder to do that when you're not in front of people, but it's not impossible. You just got to
Mm.
work hard and be very intentional about it.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the things we're doing. The other thing, about this whole notion of leading change, whether you're with people or not,
Mm.
in person, you've got to identify the concentric circles of influence.
Okay.
So when you look at an organization, you're not looking at the whole organization of influence. It's like a pyramid. You start at the very top, at who are the most influential people that I've first got to, they've got to buy into me and I want to
Mm.
buy into them.
Mm.
Then you go down the next level, and then you go down the next level, so on and so forth. So for example, for us, the very first people that we wanted to get to know were the two or three staff members that
Mm.
are in Hong Kong. And we wanted to get to know them, have conversations, talk about their families, talk about what they're concerned about, things like that, because they are the core of what happens in that place, right?
Yeah.
Then from there we go, okay, maybe we can start touching base with some of the volunteer leaders. So it's concentric circles. If you try that scatter bomb approach where you're trying to influence everyone all at the same time, it's a waste. Because here's the thing about the concentric circles. If you get people in the center on side, then they are going to help you with the next concentric circle.
Yeah, right.
And then they're going to help you with the next concentric circle, and so on and so forth.
Great.
So that's a big part of it too. So in other words, the patience part is not just the timeline. It's also don't try and influence everyone straight away.
Yeah.
Figure out key people you've got to influence and connect with straight away.
Gotcha.
And that also is a patience thing, working through those concentric circles of people.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such good advice. So what about teams? Because that's the other thing that you do really, really well. And I know I've watched you at work as you built your teams in Mumbai and, even in Brisbane, in the number of campuses that you've led here. How do you go through the process of engaging volunteers? Because that's probably one of the hardest things to do. As a business owner, you've got the leverage of a wage, where you can get people to do what you need them to do. But in a volunteer setting, you're really working with people who can say no to you and they don't have to be there. But how do you get them to buy in and, I guess, work in a capacity that really makes them very high contributors to the organization when really volunteering is all they've got?
Yeah, and that's the thing. You have to be such a skilled leader when you're leading volunteers, because there's no financial incentive for them to perform high level. So you have to be a very skilled leader. So maybe you start at the place. Maybe what you're talking about here is recruiting team members.
Yeah.
People to join the team in the first place. In a volunteer setting, I probably think of three things: the person, the cause, and the challenge. So what I mean by that is this: the person is you. People will buy into you before they buy into the cause.
Yeah.
So it comes back to that whole thing. Are you a people person? Are you nice to people? It's not just that you're nice to people. Are you passionate? Like, people see your passion about your team. If you're a morbid, depressed kind of person about your team, you're not going to attract anyone. People will buy into you before they buy into your team, your job, your roles, whatever. So enthusiasm, joy, energy, that comes from vision. So I've been talking about culture, but vision is important because I've got to have this vision that I'm excited about. Yeah. When people see my excitement, they also see that I care about them, that I'm a nice person. There's energy, there's joy about what I do. People are attracted to people, not organizations.
Yeah.
They think they are, but they are only attracted to the organization that have the attractive people. And I'm not talking about physical attractiveness, right? There's an emotional, there's a spiritual attractiveness, an emotional attractiveness, and so people buy into the person. Then the second one is they need a cause. So that's when vision comes into it. Once they've bought into you, do you have a cause that is worth their time and effort and their sacrifice?
Yeah.
No matter how small the cause is. So if someone has a mundane task, how do you attach that mundane task to a bigger noble cause? Not faking it, not lying to people. But if someone is setting up chairs for a church service, that's a mundane task that seems a little boring. But how do you attach that task to the cause of helping people? The logistics of running this service, this church, is ultimately going to help someone. So you've got to sell the vision or the cause. Yeah. And then the challenge. The challenge is this: to boldly ask people to commit to something. And this is where a lot of people fall down. They are trying to attract people almost in a gimmicky way, but they actually don't just sit down and have a conversation, look someone in the eye and say, I think you would be great for this role. I would like to ask you to commit to being a volunteer leader for 6 months or for 1 year. And that's just that challenge of just ask. You have not because you ask not, right? Yeah. And I see that in Jesus's life. Jesus is someone that I look to as an amazing leader. So when I study his leadership in the Bible, he was attractive to people. Before he started deploying other people of influence, people just started following him. They just liked him. They just wanted to be around him. He also had a great cause, the kingdom of God. So people were attracted to his cause. And then the final one is he just went up to people, looked him in the eye and said, come follow me. He challenged people. He wasn't backwards. So a lot of leaders are all apologetic. And it's like, oh, look, I'm sorry. I don't want to inconvenience you. Oh, I'm blah, blah, blah. No. If you have to apologize while you're asking someone, then they're probably not going to want to help you.
Yeah.
I always, and I don't do this arrogantly, but if I believe in my cause and I'm excited about the person and the cause and the connection that they have, then I'm not apologizing for asking them to help. I'm actually excited that I'm giving them the opportunity to help. So that changes the way you ask, right? It's a mindset. And so probably those three things stand out to me in terms of recruiting and building teams, particularly for volunteers.
So good. So good. And look, I think that applies to even paid employees as well, because there's one thing to just work for the money. There's another thing to work because you love what you do and you love the organization you're with. And if leaders, whether they're in a secular setting or in a volunteer, not-for-profit setting, you've got to inspire people to want to follow you and want to go where you're going. So that's such great advice, Sunjay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that you feel particularly passionate about? We've talked about finding your identity, your purpose, your wiring. We've talked about culture and building teams. Is there anything else you'd like to add to what we've said tonight?
I just reckon that a lot of what we said kind of started with this whole notion of being reflective of who you are as a person or what's going on inside you. And I just want to encourage people, don't neglect that side of things. Often we're so outward focused on what we want to accomplish that we forget that our biggest asset that we have is what God has given us. My talents, my giftings. Think about who you are. Be okay with who you are. Work through your insecurities. Take time to become more healthy emotionally, healthy physically. And all of that affects your leadership, your team building, the way you build culture, everything. It affects anything you want to do in life. I've probably, one of the best things that's happened to me in the last 20 years is I went from being an insecure kid who struggled to like himself to being, I actually like myself. I like who I am. I like the way I'm wired. I know I'm different, but I'm okay to be different. I'm not trying to copy anyone else. I'm a little bit extreme because I'm so passionate. So some people think I'm a bit extreme. I don't mind. I like myself. I'm not trying to tone down for you. I am sensitive about you or the other people, but I'm not trying to, because I like who I am. And so I think that's a big thing. Get to a place you're going to be a much more effective leader if you become more emotionally healthy as a person.
So good.
That's still growing in, and but I can see the benefits of going through some of that stuff already.
Yeah, that's awesome. Such good advice. So work on yourself, look inwards, and learn to like yourself. I love it. I love it so much. If people want to get in touch with you or they want to find out more about what you do, where can they go? Where's the best place to find Sunjay?
Follow me on social media. I'm not an avid social media user because I don't like comparing myself and looking at other people. But I do get messages on Facebook and Instagram, and I do reply to them. So Sunjay Stevenson at something or other, or at Sunjay Stevenson or something like that.
All right, cool. We'll put the link in the description just in case anybody's looking for that. That's awesome. And thank you so much for spending time with me tonight talking. I've learnt stuff from you, and I really believe that the people listening tonight have got a lot of value out of what you've said. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I've enjoyed the conversation. It's been really great.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of value out of that episode. Don't forget to let us know what you thought in the comments. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover next time, we'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone that would benefit from the content that we produce, please like and share this channel. And we look forward to having you next time on the Tarun Stevenson Leadership Channel.